everybody. It's Presvytera Kerry from the Center for Family Care. Following Easter, we begin to read a very different and special book of the Bible that is called the Acts of the Apostles. It's a book that teaches us what happened after Jesus died and was resurrected and ascended into heaven, and how the people who followed Jesus set up the church. They had some arguments and there was some confusion about how to set the church up. They looked for leaders and they had some leaders, but they still had to work very hard at trying to figure out how to get the church set up. And we also read about some very special people in the Acts of the Apostles. And one of these people is the woman Tabitha, who also had the name of Dorcas in Greek. We don't know a whole lot about her like we know about some of the other saints of our church, but we do know she was from a place called Joppa and that she was devoted to good works and acts of charity. Well, this woman Tabitha got sick and she died. And some of the disciples knew that Peter was in a nearby town and they called for him to come right away when they learned that this disciple of Christ had died. So Peter came and he found her body laid in an upper room, and it had been washed and taken care of. And there were many widows in the room who were crying and mourning her death. Well, when Peter got there, these women showed him some of the tunics and clothing that Tabitha had sewed. That's very interesting that they showed him something like that, and that we learn that Tabitha was somebody who liked to sew. And I wonder if she was living right now, being devoted to acts of charity, if she would be making masks for people to help to protect them during this time. So Peter came and found Tabitha. She was dead, and he asked the woman to leave the room. He prayed and he said, "Tabitha, get up." And Tabitha opened her eyes and she sat up and she continued to live. It's interesting that after learning her name and where she was from, the first thing we learn about Tabitha is her devotion to good works and to acts of charity. This is what is set apart for us to show us her devotion to Jesus Christ and how she lived out her belief in him. So, while we're at home right now, what good works and acts of charity can we be doing right in our own homes? Children, maybe good works for you right now is being a little bit more obedient to your parents. Parents, maybe a good work for you right now would be to be a little bit more patient with your children, because being in close quarters for so many hours each day, it's easy sometimes to lose patience. Children, maybe another good work would be doing a chore or two every day without being asked. Parents, perhaps another good work for you might be dropping everything at some point during the day, and instead of the children being in front of a television or a screen, playing with them. These are possible good works in the home. And another good work that we can always do and that we're all called to do, no matter where we are and no matter what our circumstances, is to pray. And particularly right now, to be praying for other people, for frontliners, for those who are sick, for those who are alone. And as families, something we could consider doing is possibly having a family meeting and sitting down and thinking about one act of charity that the family can do together this coming week. Now that things are starting to open up a little bit in some states, we may be able to extend ourselves outside of our home. And maybe you can all gather together and make a decision about an act of charity following the example of Tabitha and how she lived out her Christian faith.